New York real estate was supposed to be running scared. The numbers now say it's regrouping, and that shift stretches from Manhattan's $4 million contracts to Connecticut Colonials and the sands of Miami Beach. Start in Manhattan, where the high end just broke script. In November 2025, buyers signed 176 contracts at $4,000 or more. That was a jump of 25% from October's 141 deals. One firm tracking luxury noted November's $150 one closed sales above $4,000 rose more than $30 1% from October's $115, and the last week of November alone logged 17 contracts above that threshold, beating a 10-year Thanksgiving week average. In a market supposedly bracing for flight, the pen hit paper, even harder than the broader market. Why now? Part of the answer is ambient strength. Throughout 2025, sales and prices rose year over year in New York City, with sales outpacing inventory and rents climbing alongside rental activity. That broad lift converged with a booming financial backdrop. Payouts on Wall Street were pegged to rise by up to 25% this year from a strong base in 2024, when bonuses were already the largest since 1987. The logic is simple. When incomes rise, premium apartments move. November's 176 tells that story in ink. At the same time, a political storyline collided with hard data. In June, a Democratic Socialist candidate shocked the field with a primary win. In November, he carried the general election. The platform included increased eviction protections, rent freezes, and new tax ideas aimed at top earners. Proposals range from a 2% income tax surcharge on those making more than $1,000 a year to raising the city's top rate from 3.9% toward 5.9%, a shift that would push combined city and state rates near 17%. The forecast from some corners was flight. On paper, a different migration took shape. In Florida, agents on Miami Beach's oceanfront corridors reported a 166% spike in inquiries from New York-based buyers after that November result. Along Billionaires Beach, the stretch of Collins Avenue from 14th Street to 21st Street, the top-shelf inventory comes with top-shelf figures. At Ritz-Carlton residences, one bedrooms at roughly $1,200 square feet start around $8,000, $600,000. 3, 4, and 5 bedrooms range from $10,000, $500,000 to $22,000 and up. Twin penthouses with private rooftop pools list between $50,000 to $5,000 and $60,000-$9,000. Elsewhere on the sand, a new 73-residence tower known as the Paragon is fielding ultra-high net worth interest with 2 bedrooms from $12,000, $500,000, and 4-bedroom offerings up to $70,000. In the urban core, a planned 80-story tower branded Cipriani is slated for 400 condominiums, with its least expensive residences just under $2,000. Yet the Manhattan Ledger kept marking deals. Luxury contracts over $4,000 rose at more than twice the rate of the overall market in November. The flight narrative hit a speed bump against those 176 signatures. It doesn't erase the fact that migration to Florida has been underway for years. More than 72,000 New Yorkers moved to the Sunshine State in 2023, and nearly $9,500,000 in household income flowed from New York to Southeast Florida in 2021. But in the micro window of late 2025, the data tilted toward resilience, not retreat. The center of gravity isn't just Midtown Towers. It's shifting tracks into the commuter belt. Forecasts for 2026 call the New York City suburbs, Long Island, the Hudson Valley, northern New Jersey, and Fairfield County among the country's hottest markets. Southwestern Connecticut is squarely in that frame. There, 5 names anchor a metro: Stamford, Bridgeport, Norwalk, Fairfield, and Greenwich. One outlook puts home prices in that combined area up 6.9% in the new year. That's not a guess in a vacuum. Stamford's own tape told a similar story through November 2027, with sales running 6% ahead of the pace set in 2024. Median prices at the midpoint of the market rose to $710,000 for the first 11 months of this year, up from $650,000 across the same span last year. The on-the-ground picture flickers between bidding wars and bargains. In Stamford, a $995,000 listing on Dewland Drive pulled more than 900 views on Zillow in under 20 hours, a sharp share of attention compared with roughly 165 other properties statewide that hit the market in the same window. Price discovery cut both ways. A split-level colonial on Timber Mill Road went for $75,000 below a $985,000 ask first set in July, and a Norwalk home on Grandview Avenue closed at a 20% discount from its original listing. But sellers won big too. A Palmer Hill townhouse on Havmeyer Lane fetched $200,000 above asking, and a New Canaan colonial closed $100,000 over list. Behind those outcomes is a commuting calculus. Buyers want the tether and the backyard. A home minutes from the Merritt Parkway, close to a New Canaan train platform and restaurants, promises options, city-bound 5 days a week, or hybrid with a home office and a yard. The searchers in 2005 weren't window shopping. Many needed keys. That urgency: buy to plant roots, buy to build equity, buy to stop writing rent checks, lined up with a policy shift inside companies as more Manhattan employers cemented return-to-office rules. It's not universal, but every extra day in the office moves the dial for the Merritt, for the Hudson Line, for the Garden State Parkway. The backdrop is bigger than train schedules. Mortgage costs define the boundary of what buyers can carry, and the rate path into 22/6 frames the next act. Forecasts now point toward an average of about 6.3% for a 30-year mortgage in 2026, down from an estimated 6.6% in 2025. Periodic dips below 6% may show up, but the range is still high compared to the pandemic years. Even at those levels, a weaker job market could prompt interest rate cuts. Inflation risks could interrupt them. Translating that to transactions, expectations call for existing home sales to rise about 3% in 26 versus 25. A warmer spring than last year's, when rates hovered near 6.8%, could pull more buyers off the sidelines. But there's a catch. People who lost jobs or fear losing them, especially to white-collar automation, may hold back. Renters face a different cycle. Demand for apartments is expected to increase as supply falls, pushing rents higher in many metros. By the end of 2026, the projected increase runs in the 2% to 3% range, roughly in line with expected inflation. Construction on new apartments slowed from 2021 to 2022 and isn't likely to re-accelerate soon, creating tighter competition for every unit. In South Florida and Southern California, rental demand growth may be capped by tighter immigration policies, even as many would-be buyers remain renters because purchase prices still sit high. The map isn't uniform. Some metros stand to cool. Nashville, San Antonio, and Austin appear on that list. So do 3 Florida markets: Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach, and Miami. The reasons illustrate a homeowner's ledger. Natural disasters are pushing many insurers to raise premiums. Higher insurance costs cascade into monthly payments and closing budgets. Layer in a return-to-office shift that draws some remote workers back toward legacy job hubs, and the logic turns. As coastal exposure and insurance headaches climb, the edge of the Midwest and Great Lakes becomes more attractive. Places like Cleveland, St. Louis, Minneapolis, and Madison show up within the circle of relative affordability and perceived safety from flood and wildfire. Back in Manhattan, the long view matters. New York City peaked at 8.8 million residents in 2020, slid to a trough of about 8.36 million in 2022, then clawed back 2 consecutive years of growth. By 2025, the tally hovered near 8.5 million. From 2020 to 2021, the 5 boroughs added roughly 10,000 millionaires, bucking the early pandemic narrative of a hollowed-out city. Manhattan gained about 17,500 residents in 2022, many moving in from other boroughs. In May 2025, the city's planners framed the pandemic dip as a short-lived shock. That resilience shaped housing behavior. The spike in Manhattan's November luxury contracts wasn't isolated. It outpaced the broad market and pushed past a 10-year holiday week average. In other words, when the political story suggested outflow, the transactional data showed the opposite. Meanwhile, the long-running pipeline toward Florida did not suddenly switch off. 72,000 New Yorkers chose the Sunshine State in 2023. Manhattan, Nassau, Suffolk, Brooklyn, and Queens were among the top counties sending residents south. And money followed. $9,500,000 in household income moved from New York to Southeast Florida in 2021. In Miami, development inventory is priced accordingly, from sub-$2,000 offerings in a 400-condo 80-story tower to $69,000 penthouses on the beach. The simultaneous truths can coexist. 1 month's luxury surge in Manhattan and a multi-year migration stream feeding Florida. There is a barometer beyond contracts and closings. Attention. That $995,000 Stamford listing, racking up 900 views in less than 20 hours, was an early signal of a market leaning toward quick engagement. In the same tight window, 165 properties across Connecticut showed up online. Buyers, some tethered to 5-day commutes, others seeking fallback proximity, were looking, and they were decisive. Stamford's 6% rise in sales through November 2025 over 2024 is not a top-of-cycle spike, but it's solid. The median at $710,000 versus $650,000 a year earlier is an increment anchored to real households, real budgets, and a shared map. Schools in Fairfield, trains in Norwalk, office towers in Midtown, and parks in Greenwich. The next turn hinges on rate math and policy choices. A 30-year at roughly 6.3% in 22.6, if it materializes, brings psychological relief versus 22.5's 6.6% average. It also pulls sellers off the fence. Many homeowners with sub-4% loans refuse to list in 24 and early 2025. As that lock-in effect eases, inventory should normalize slowly. That's the defining theme. The great housing reset arriving in 2026 won't be a quick price correction. It will be a years-long period of gradual increases in home sales and normalization of prices as affordability improves piece by piece. Within that arc, the New York region is poised to lead. The suburbs closest to the city, the Long Island townships, river towns in the Hudson Valley, Bergen and Essex in northern New Jersey, and the corridor from Greenwich to Bridgeport, sit atop the short list of likely hotspots. Syracuse's farther upstate joins for its own reasons. So do Midwest and Great Lakes anchors where modest entry points meet steady job bases. Taken together, the shape of 2026 appears as a ring around New York City, thickening along the commuter lines and thinning along coastal markets, where insurance and climate concerns weigh heavier. The personal math of home buying will still swing between inspiration and fatigue. In southwestern Connecticut, some buyers kept losing. Others saw their budgets stretch. That's how a Palmer Hill townhouse commanded $200,000 over list, while a Norwalk home had to accept a 20% cut. In Stamford's market, one July ask at $980, $5,000 needed a $75,000 trim to sell. When a single town posts a $710,000 median through 11 months for 25, up from $650,000 in the first 11 months of 24, that tells you pricing isn't homogeneous. It reflects school district lines, traffic patterns to the Merritt Parkway, and a willingness to trade quartz counters for a shorter train ride. On the renter side, fewer new buildings from 2021 to 2022 means more competition for the units already out there. By the end of 2006, rent increases in many metros are expected to land near 2 to 3%, around inflation. It's hardly relief. It pushes would-be buyers to save more, stay longer, or widen their search radius. In Southern California and South Florida, where immigration policy dampens the inflow of tenants, that pressure may ease at the margin, but only at the margin. The broader current still runs toward higher rents. For Floridian for-sale markets, the pressure is different, where insurers retreat or reprice ownership costs balloon. In Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach, and Miami, this year's cooling pulse traces to storms and the actuarial tables that follow them. When premiums spike, monthly payments follow, and the buyer pool shrinks. If remote roles contract at the same time, nudging workers back to New York, Chicago, or Minneapolis offices, the gravitational pull toward commuting metros grows. That's how the city's ring of suburbs climbs into the conversation for hottest in 2026, even as Miami's oceanfront listings attract lifelong second home buyers with $12,000, $500,000 taste and $70,000 budgets. Turn the camera back to Manhattan's skyline. The November tally, 176 luxury contracts, wasn't just a number. It was a message. Even with a City Hall podium promising rent freezes and eviction protections, and even with talk of new taxes on incomes above $1,000, high-end buyers leaned in. The push and pull between policy and market won't resolve in a month. It will evolve across quarters. Watch how many listings sign above $4,000 during the traditionally slower months, how the gap between new contract volume and resale inventory shifts, and whether the 10-year holiday week average keeps getting beat. The migration ledger will keep moving lines. In 2023, 72,000 New Yorkers logged Sunshine State addresses. In 2,200, $9,500,000 in household income followed. Those are structural figures. Meanwhile, the 5 boroughs' headcount rose over the last 2 years, and the population sits around 8.5 million. Between 2020 and 2021, the city minted about 10,000 more millionaires. Manhattan itself gained roughly 17,500 residents in 22. The net picture isn't a straight line. It's churn, some to Miami or Palm Beach, some to Suffolk or Fairfield, and others from Queens to Manhattan. In that churn, the single-family zones just beyond city limits stand out. Fairfield County, home to Stamford, Norwalk, Fairfield, Greenwich, and Bridgeport, shows what a rebalanced market looks like. Through November 2020, 6.5, Stamford sales climbed 6% compared with 2024. The median moved from $650,000 to $710,000 in 11 months. In minutes, a DeLon Drive listing drew 900 sets of eyes. Across the state, 165 new listings flickered on in the same period. When a Palmer Hill unit gets $200,000 above ask and a new Canaan Colonial snags $100,000 over list, bidders aren't just measuring square footage, they're measuring their commute. There's a persistent undercurrent: urgency. Buyers explained it plainly in 2025. They aren't browsing, they need a home. They increased budgets after missing out. They waived marginal preferences for major ones like train times. When mortgage rates crack closer to 6% in 26, some of that urgency could relax. Yet the expected 6.3% average leaves many families doing the math on $710,000 medians at Stamford, on $650,000 medians last year, on a 3% gain in existing home sales, and on rent running 2 to 3% higher by year's end. The decision isn't abstract. It's school calendar versus payroll calendar. It's a 5-day commute, or 3. It's paying $200,000 above list, or waiting for a $75,000 price cut. New York's core absorbs these choices. If developers step to meet demand, especially in the suburbs, build to suit single-family homes and townhouses will matter. If they don't, buyers jostle harder for that Palmer Hill townhouse and that new Canaan Colonial. In Manhattan, new contract outperformance over $4,000 in November hints at continued appetite at the top. There too, product mix matters. Pre-war co-ops against new glass penthouses, $4,000 base against $69,000 rooftops. As Wall Street bonuses rise, up to 25% in 25, on top of 2024's peak since 1987, the tranche of buyers able to play in that tier expands. But it is not only about the top. The city's rental market, which ran hot in 2025, informs 2026. Rising rents and rising rental activity give middle-market buyers 2 paths: stretch now or wait. With less new apartment construction since 2021 and 2022, the wait gets more expensive. If mortgage rates glide from 6.6% in 2005 toward 6.3% in 2006, with flirtations under 6%, some renters will switch columns. The broader effect, a projected 3% lift in existing home sales for 26, will show up unevenly by borough and by suburb. A final look at Florida brings the contrast into focus. Miami Beach can launch a $8,600,000 one-bedroom with 1,200 square feet and sell it to a New Yorker ready to move after a November election. The Paragon can post a $12,500 two-bedroom and a $70,000 four-bedroom and find takers from the same zip codes as Museum Mile. A 400-condo, 80-story tower can list its least costly homes just under $2,000 and rode that 166% spike in New York originated inquiries logged by one prominent sales team in the days following a political event. All those things can be true, while Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach, and Miami, as broader metro markets, cool because insurers push premiums higher and remote jobs give way to office mandates. The top of the market doesn't always move with the middle. So, what's next? The base case is a patient thaw. Into 26, the New York regions ring Long Island, the Hudson Valley, northern New Jersey, and Fairfield County remains one of the nation's most competitive corridors. Price growth slows but stays positive, with that 6.9% projection for the metro that includes Stamford, Bridgeport, Norwalk, Fairfield, and Greenwich, setting a rough ceiling for the near term. Mortgage rates drift toward an average near 6.3%, occasionally dipping below 6%. Existing home sales end the year about 3% higher than 2025. Rents keep climbing, about 2 to 3% by year-end because new apartments are scarce and households still form. Two things to watch could bend that path. First, policy. The incoming administration's approach to a rent freeze, eviction protections, and higher taxes on incomes over $1,000, whether a 2% surcharge or nudging the top city rate toward 5.9%, could alter investor math, push or pull landlords between condo conversion and rental hold, and affect the timing of listings from would-be sellers deciding whether to stay. Second, the rate floor and labor market. If inflation flares and holds the average 30-year above 6.3%, or if job losses accelerate, especially in white-collar roles exposed to automation, the projected 3% lift in existing home sales may stall, and the suburbs' heat may simmer rather than boil. Between the skyline and the cul-de-sacs, the story converges on a single line. New York remains a gravity well. It pulls money, it pulls talent, it pulls buyers. In November 2020 Live, it even pulled 176 luxury contracts across the $4,000 line. The neighborhoods just beyond its borders are gearing up for the spillover. And even as Miami Beach sales galleries quote $50,000 to $60,000 for rooftop pools, parts of coastal Florida reset under the weight of storms and insurance math. Into 2026, that's the trade to watch. The strength of the city, the reach of its suburbs, and the pace at which the cost of money and the cost of risk move in opposite directions. If you value clear-eyed, number-driven storytelling on where New York housing is really headed, stay with us for the next turn.